So today's episode is going to be called Life, Making Sense of Life as a Video Game. And we're going to do a little bit of an intro and then we'll get into it. And I hope that you will enjoy this fresh new perspective, potentially a new lens to look through life or look at life through today. For those of you that know me, I wear glasses without lenses just to remind myself that I make that choice, how I'm going to look at things, because that's the real essence of my work in this podcast is to not just acknowledge that if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change, but to actually give you the tools and systems and structures to help you execute on that. So I want to welcome everybody to Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast. And just let you know that this podcast covers topics that expand human consciousness and performance. So on the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast, we acknowledge really two main things, and that is that it's who you are that determines how well what you do works, and that perception, which is really everything. And you're in the beginning of a day right now, loving this already. Great, Christy. Is it Christy? Chris? Oh no, Chris the Bless. Chris the Bliss. Oh, that's a cool name. So if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change, right? So it's who you are that determines how well what you do works. But also, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And the reason why that's so important is because perception is subjective. It's an acquired taste, and it's something that we're always going to work on. So that's the purpose of this podcast. That's the purpose of any message is, what else might be true about things? So you'll look at my content on Substack. You'll look at all my content when my book publishes. It's called Make Sense. You'll see that it's all there. So I want to welcome everybody to what I call the uprising of the sleepwalking masses, and welcome to the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast. And I see some folks coming in. So if you're commenting and I can't see your name, it's on Substack I can see your names, but on other platforms like YouTube and Facebook, sometimes you have to sign in to do that. So let's have some fun. And I see Samuel John is here. So Substack is showing up in full force today. So today's topic and today's episode is called Life is a Video Game. And I'm going to share with you 10 mind-shifting truths to help you navigate adversity like a pro player. We're going to talk about gamifying life today. And it just might be the episode and the message that you needed to hear if you're creating the illusion that you're struggling in life today. Maybe you're just not acknowledging a couple of things, and maybe you just need to learn how to play the game. So my subtitle to this is How Seeing Life as a Virtual Adventure Unlocks Purpose, Resilience, and Peace in the Face of Challenges. I'll share with you just quickly in a live fashion. A lot of these things won't show up in the podcast. And by the way, our podcast, Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast, is getting almost 200,000 downloads a month right now. It's just crazy. So for anybody out there that is thinking about starting a podcast or thinking about doing anything, when I started, I had no reason to believe it was going to be something anyone would want to hear, right? But I just did it anyway. And I stayed true to myself, and I practiced consistency and perseverance and resilience because life is very interesting. And it's just crazy that not only it's growing in leaps and bounds, thanks to all of you, but I'm actually getting advertising money for it now. So it's just insane. I mean, it makes sense to me because of all the work that I put in, and I've never quit, but it wasn't my intention to leverage all of that work to create that. So I just wanted to, share with you, hey, Jason Charles Geiger has joined. Welcome, welcome. I just want to let you know that, the fact that my podcast is in the top 1% and making money and all of that stuff, that wasn't the intention. My intention was that I loved my idea, and it was something from the heart that I wanted to share, as I'm doing with you now live. And I just followed through with reckless abandonment. I filtered out all of what we would call the noise, and I just stayed very, very focused on the signal of what it was that I was doing. And I'm not surprised that it's successful with my Superman shirt on, surprise. So, in any case, let's go over what this topic is about today. So, what if the next time you hit a setback, you didn't spiral into an anxiety session or self doubt, but instead saw it as what the kids would call a boss battle? What if your emotional breakdown, you might be in one right now, you might have just had one, or you might be worried about one, but what if your emotional breakdown was actually a level up moment, an opportunity, and your heartbreak, a hidden side quest that's just leading to a deeper meaning? So this is the idea of just saying, what if something else might be true? What if I decided to pick up the pen and write a different story about what's going on today? Because there's a lot of interesting things that we see when kids are playing games. They actually get excited about adversity. We'll get into that. So it might sound strange at first, but more and more thinkers, philosophers, and scientists, from people like Elon Musk, I mean, probably not a very popular name to some people, but smart dude. He's a big thinker, right? To Oxford professor Nick Bostrom. I don't know if there's any Nick Bostrom fans out there. They're asking this one bold question, and it's a question that I love to ask. What if reality wasn't reality? And what if reality was just a simulation, some sort of matrix? I don't know if there's any people out there that come from that camp. So, according to Bostrom's simulation argument, he says that there's a 99% chance that what we perceive as real life, baseline real life, is actually just part of a high fidelity simulation. That's his hypothesis. And he says that there's a 99% chance, after he looks at his data, that that's the case, which means there's only a 1% chance that it's not. Right. And some people say that's preposterous because you can't prove it either way. So that would make you have to entertain that it might be true. Whether literal or metaphorical, that idea changes everything. That's called a game changer, that idea. So, because it means that we might not have to take life so, I don't want to say seriously, but so personally. We might not have to take life so personally. We can actually start to play letters PLAY. We can actually start to play this game more consciously. This is a fun topic. So let's get into this. So when life feels real, that's the problem, right? When you're going through something and it feels real. So let's be honest, modern life is brutal on the human nervous system. If I'm going to be transparent, I'm going through some life right now, and how I look at it and how I label it and absorb it and get tethered to it has everything to do with what happens to my nervous system. So Samuel says, so I'm going to interact with you guys when you say something, but Samuel from Substack says, definitely had an emotional breakdown. Okay, so you and I are the same, and would agree, field leveled up, right? Isn't that interesting about an emotional breakdown, Samuel, is that it sucks to go, that's why we say embrace the suck, right? Another book I'm writing about that topic. But it sucks to be in the suck, but it's always better on the other side. I mean, like another weird analogy, I remember, being sick from college parties or just being sick from life and vomiting. And I hated that, but I always felt better after, you know, fully embraced. So let's be honest, modern life is brutal on the human nervous system. Brutal. We're emotionally fried at times, spiritually dehydrated and mentally overwhelmed by things like constant comparison. Thanks, social media. Hey, let's give a big thanks and shout out to social media. I mean, it's got a lot of benefits, but I mean, you're using it right now. But constant comparison, imposter syndrome, and perfectionism, decision fatigue. God, how many decisions are we being asked to make every day? And so many distractions, more distractions than ever. One of my favorite quotes is, remember that learning and knowing things is nothing more than a distraction in the absence of action. We spend more time right? Distracted than in action. There's more distraction than action. So there's also invisible expectations and emotional burnout. Sometimes we don't even know why we're burnt out. The other day, I was just like, I said, I'm having a bad day. And in our house, we go, is that right? Hmm. That's what the hat is for. And when I really looked at it, I didn't even know why. So this creates a tidal wave of stress, anxiety, disconnection, and paralysis. And most of it isn't even real. And that's what we're challenging today. It's actually just a perception. It's part of your conditioning and your programming. We talk about your programmers being your mother, father, teacher, preacher, society and evolution, all things that come from, our upbringing and the formative years and everything like that, which indicates that we've received most of the knowledge that we use to create our perspectives and our perceptions from others. So that would make me go, hmm. By the way, HMMM stands for haven't made up my mind. See, I haven't made up my mind about anything yet. And I don't know if I ever will. That's a fun game to play. So it's about perception, it's about programming. It's what happens when we confuse the game for our identity. Isn't that an interesting way to look at it? It's one thing to perceive that something is, but when you absorb it as who you are, your identity, it gets a little bit dicey. So we it's when we look at the game and identify with it, but then forget that the player behind the screen is really who you are. Isn't that interesting? It's not the game that dictates who we are. We're the player of the game. So here's the twist. So on our podcast and all of our stuff, by allowing yourself and permitting yourself to have another vantage point, it gives you the ability to have a twist. So what if I told you that there's only 1%? There's only a 1% chance that any of this, including what you're doing with me right now, is real. So Elon Musk says this, and I love that he said this because it's true. He said the odds that we're in a base reality are in a billion. 1 in a billion chance odds that what we're in right now is baseline reality. And here we are trying to create AI. You know, who's to say we're not the most advanced AI, so advanced that we've decided that we're the baseline reality and we're going to create some sort of artificial intelligence? Come on. So Bostrom simulation theory suggests the same thing, and he's got the data to back it up. If any civilization could simulate consciousness in reality, which we're on the verge of doing again, perhaps, got to get back to the day job. Okay, good, Samuel. Nice to stop by. This will be on my Substack, and if you're a subscriber to my Substack, it'll go out in the email, the recording of it. So think about that, right? So this is Nick Bostrom. He's saying that if we have the ability, if we're a civilization that could duplicate reality, right, and we do have that ability, then the chance that we're the original real world is almost zero. So what he's saying is, and this is an important part of learning to allow yourself to play the game, is allowing yourself to recognize that most likely there's a very, very good chance that what we're in right now is just a simulation. And it doesn't matter if you believe that or not. If you look at the reality that we're about to create a technology that can duplicate consciousness, if we succeed at that, then there is a 0% chance that we can claim that we're a baseline reality, because then it'll be possible to recreate consciousness. So who's to say we didn't create? We're not that recreation. I just love that idea because it gives me permission to go, maybe I should just think about things first before I let my conditioned mind dictate. So, but here's the beautiful part. You don't actually have to believe that we're in a literal simulation for this to matter, for you to learn how to just play the game. So you start to zoom out of emotional spirals. You're in an emotional spiral and you start to separate from participating in it and just observe it. Say, looks like there's an emotional spiral going on, like you're watching a movie, eating some popcorn. So you can also learn how to reframe failure as feedback. I think a lot of people are into that. Experience setbacks as a storyline. The other day we were having a little bit of a pity party because that's the knee jerk reflex. And we've reframed it and we said, when we're up on stage and everybody's like, oh my God, how did you guys become so successful? Kind of like with my podcast. People don't know all the failure that I went through to create my podcast. we were able to reframe it and say, the best part of the story that we're going to tell, how we climbed to success, is how we failed, right? So we reframed our failure and we said, hey, this is the best part. And for those of you that have experienced incredibly high levels of success and incredibly low levels of failure, I question whether or not the tough spot is the best part. I never learned from my wins. I learned from my failures. So experience setbacks as a storyline and then stop managing stress and start mastering strategy. So that's what a gamer does, is they master strategy. Whenever they get knocked down, they come back and they try not to make the same mistake and they try new things, right? And that's because they're not worried about losing because they get another replay. And we do too. We do too. I mean, I don't know if there's a replay after we die because I've never tried that. But I know that every time I fail, I get another quarter to put into the machine. So, and that's what we're about to do today. Is we're gonna do all that stuff. So here's 10 game theory shifts. These are really cool. Here are 10 game theory shifts that will change how you see life. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some good shift. There's some good shift here. I'm going to give you some shifts that are going to give you the opportunity to kind of like use these. And I'll put the transcript of this. Maybe I'll do a Substack on it. So if you want to just find my Substack, it's called Make Sense Substack. Series is called Echoes of but I will do a Substack and put the podcast episode on it. So make sure you subscribe to that. So let's reframe life through the lens of gameplay, mechanics, and meaning. Because if this is a simulation, you might as well play to win. So that's the cool thing about the simulation is it doesn't say, hey, fuck it. Why bother? Right? That's not the way gamers game. Is they have one thing to do, and that is to win the game. So it's okay to set goals and want to win the game. So let's learn how to play this game well, and let's learn how to win. So here's the first shift. I call it the level up effect. And these are kind of original. I made these up. So the level 1 effect, growth is built into the game. So this game that we're playing has growth as part of its code, right? What that means is that growth is possible. It's part of the game. So each level gets harder, but the rewards increase too. In games and in life, you face tougher battles because you're becoming the kind of player who can handle them. That's a fun aspect. That's called the level up effect. So here's the reframe. This challenge isn't punishment, it's progression. So we've heard that in other ways, but that's built into the game. So the next time you struggle and fail, maybe you look at it as training. You're getting stronger for the boss battle. So here's the second shift, the avatar upgrade effect. That's what I call it. You're not a character. You're the player. You're the primary player of the game. You start with the default avatar, right? The one that you remember I said who you are determines how well what you do works. So the who that you started with, this avatar, might not have been great at some things that you're now great at. So you start with a default avatar, but the more you play, this is the training, the more you customize, which is from learning and upgrade and evolve, and you get better and better and better. And that's the same thing in life, isn't it? So life kind of is a game if you look at it that way. Here's the reframe. I'm not stuck with who I was. I can design who I want to become. It's a game theory. Isn't that cool? So theory number 3 and shift number 3, the quest line principle. I love this one because this is a great way to look at life as a whole. Because if you're in a hole, in a dark hole, and you think that things are not going well, um, I'm going to just encourage you to change the way you look at things. So here's one way. Look at life as a quest line. So purpose isn't given, it's chosen. So we get to choose our purpose. I'm very, very intentional about that right now. I'm very intentional of looking at what I want, why, and doing only things like 80% of my day today will be things that support me acquiring that. The other 20% will be things that are important, like my health, my family, all of that stuff. But I will obsessively spend 80% of my day to day, the next 16, 18 hours, executing on things that are tapped into that. So purpose isn't given, it's chosen. Some quests are handed to you, others you just stumble into. I like that principle. I like this idea of recognizing the possibility of just stumbling into things. But meaning comes when you say yes to the mission. So when I look at the challenges ahead and I see the win, then I can say, well, the juice is worth the squeeze. But I have to look at the challenges and the responsibilities associated with it and say something to myself like, I accept the challenge, right? I say yes to the mission, which is a game theory. So here's the reframe. My story gets more and more interesting when I start following the calling. Do you have a calling? That's what a calling is. It's not just a purpose, but a calling is something that you follow. Are you following your calling? And if you're not, it's not a calling. It's just an idea that you haven't locked into as a calling. My story gets interesting when I start following the calling. Number 4, the boss battle pattern. This is probably my favorite game theory and shift. Big obstacles mean you're on the edge of evolution. You know what's interesting about kids? If you watch a kid play a game, at the end of every level, especially these new games, there's some sort of boss battle. That's what they call them. I go, what is that? My daughter, my kids say, oh, it's the boss battle. Uh-oh, boss battle coming up. And if you look at their state management, they get excited about the boss battle. They don't say, "Oh, why bother?" And you know what? They're going to lose like 10 times to that boss because they don't know how to beat the boss. Who you are determines how well what you do works. Change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So when the boss comes, they all say, "It's the boss battle." And you know why they get excited? Because they know that when they beat the boss and they'll do nothing that nothing will stop them from beating this boss. And they will learn from mistakes. They will die, and get rejuvenated and learn and learn and learn, and maybe even like do some research and find out the secret moves. But they will beat that boss. And the win will be that they will get to the next level. And guess what the next level leads to? Another boss. Can you see the similarities in life? So you don't face a boss until you've earned your way to the next level. So the challenges that you're bummed about right now, you earned those challenges. Isn't that cool? You get to fight that boss. It feels overwhelming. Well, no, I'm sorry. If it feels overwhelming, you're likely about to transform. Let me read that again. If it feels overwhelming, these challenges or this boss battle ahead of you, it means that you're likely to be in a position where you're about to transform. That's the way a gamer would look at life. And that's your opportunity today. So here's your reframe. This is my edge. So that's kind of the boss battle. You're at the edge, right? You might be experiencing fear of failure, overwhelm, fear of success. This is my edge, and I'm about to break through. Can you get excited about your boss battle today? Number 5, the respawn rule. And I touched on this before. The respawn rule. Failure isn't the end, it's just a checkpoint. I love the idea of looking at setbacks, failures, challenges, adversities as crumbs that have been left by the universe or God that are showing us how to find our way. Failure isn't the end, it's just a checkpoint. Failure is part of the journey. You will never meet anybody that has what you desire most that has not failed their way to there. You die, restart, try again. No shame, no drama, just learning. That's a game theory. So here's your reframe: reset, reboot, rise again. Guys, I don't know about you, but I had some failures yesterday and the day before and the day before, but I learned from them. I don't learn from my successes. I learn from my challenges, adversities, setbacks, letdowns, right? Okay, number 6, the save state principle. Very fun. Reflection is a soul strategy. So we can add the soul into this. Games let you save your progress. In life, you reflect to integrate. Meditation, I'm a huge meditation fan. I do transcendental meditation every day, twice a day. Meditation, journaling, stillness, these are your internal checkpoints. So there's the live version with the throat cracking. So let me read that again for the podcast. In life, you reflect to integrate. Meditation, journaling, stillness, these are your internal checkpoints. So when I meditate, I give myself permission to step away from participating in my life and just become the observer. And what's interesting about meditation, by the way, is the goal is not to completely set your mind free. The goal is to practice having your thoughts wander and coming back to center, coming back to your breath, coming back to the mantra, right? So for those of you that try meditation and you say it's not for you, it takes time. I've been doing it for years. So here's your reframe. Here's your reframe. Stillness helps me keep what I've earned. That's it. Stillness helps me keep what I've earned. Number 7. Remember, there's 10. We're almost there. The currency of consciousness. I love consciousness. Your attention is your real gold. I like to say that there's nothing more valuable that you can do in your day than arm yourself, weaponize yourself with awareness. Think about what that means. If you just start to become more conscious and aware rather than handing the keys of trust over to, your conditioned mind, which was decided and programmed by others, your mother, father, teacher, preacher, society, evolution, you are in control. You become the dominant force and shot caller of your life. This is a very, very big game theory. So in games, um, in game currency. So there's a currency in games. In game currency lets you unlock gear and power ups. This is fun. So there's a currency in there each time you overcome something. You unlock some stuff like gear, skins for your avatar, and also power ups. In life, you spend time and energy. This is what we do in life. We spend time and energy. That's what we spend. That's our money that we spend. In games, you have coins and all of that stuff to buy stuff. In life, we spend time and energy. What you focus on grows. So here's your reframe, and that's number 7, the currency of consciousness. I choose how I invest my energy and who I become because of it. So this is why we set goals and we get intentional with what we're going to do. 8, this is a fun one. If you're the kind of person that has some what I call flow burglars in your life, people that are kind of trying to steal your flow, right? Here's a great reframe for you. I call this the NPC filter. So now NPC stands for non-player character. NPC stands for non-player character. And what that is when you're in a game, there's certain characters that really don't mean anything, meaning they're standing there and you get to walk up and ask them a question or walk on by. And whatever they say is either deemed valuable to you or not. That's what an NPC is. Not everyone's voice deserves your energy in life. I love that. In games, NPCs, otherwise known as non player characters, follow basic scripts. Some deliver useful clues, but only if you interact. You choose. Remember, if somebody's trying to steal your thunder and you know just bleed you of all of your essence or whatever it is that you have that's going for you right now, we call them flow burglars. This is something that you get to choose whether or not you interact with them. Some deliver useful clues, but only if you interact. Others are just background noise. What if we decided to identify the noise in our life, the background noise, the things that have nothing to do, the things and people that have nothing to do with where you're going? You're on a bus and you're heading a certain way, and you decide who's on that bus, who's on your bus, right? Because I think it's time to kick some people off the bus. If you're on a plane and you're trying to elevate and lift off, and the captain says there's too much weight on the plane, you start throwing luggage off. And what luggage do you throw off? Don't throw any people off. But what luggage do you throw off? The ones that you need the least. So in life, not everyone is meant to define your path. You decide that. They're non-player characters. Some people repeat scripts based on their own limitations in programming. You choose when or whether you give them power. So I want to arm and equip you with that awareness here. You choose if they're a non-player character or a vital character in your story. So if there's somebody giving you shit that doesn't belong on your bus, you can just walk right by her. And you know what'll happen is they'll try to get your attention because they're used to that, but eventually they'll find somebody else. They'll find somebody else that is giving it to them. So here's your reframe. I choose which characters matter in my storyline. The rest, just noise, non-player characters. Number 9, the co-op principle. You're not meant to solo this. You're not meant to go through life on your own. In games, there's nothing better than having a partner. When you can go into an area of a game and you've got your buddies there and they're communicating. I watch my kids do this. There's nothing better than that. And there's nothing worse than being alone and getting attacked by all of the goblins and zombies. So you're not meant to do this solo. Games are better with allies. Life is richer with connection. Surround yourself with players and people that help you grow. There's the bus again, not stay stuck. Who in your life, what in your life is keeping you stuck? It's time to get rid of them and be very selective about the people that you allow into your game. Here's your reframe. I choose a party that levels me up. If you're having a party, who's on the invite list? If you run a nightclub or a bar and you're the bouncer at the front door, and we talk about this in our community, who's on your guest list? Who gets in? And who needs to be kicked the hell out? There's a power move for the day. And here's the final shift, the simulation signal. Conscious awareness is the real game changer. And I kind of mentioned that before, but the game changer here is to just be conscious and curious and open to what's really going on. And that would be you identifying that you have no way of proving that anything that we're experiencing is actually real beyond your impression of it, right? We live in a world where everybody has this desire to be right. What does that get us? So let's get curious. And if this is a simulation, then awareness is a real power. The moment you wake up, you gain access to creativity, purpose, and freedom. So remember, you don't have to believe in the simulation hypothesis. Great book by a guest on our podcast, Rizwan Virk. That's a Virk. He wrote The Simulation Hypothesis and a bunch of other books. But you don't have to acknowledge everything as so vital and important and take it personal, because the chances of this being real are 1%. And that's the data right there. So you don't have to believe in that, but you can, even if you don't believe in it, just start deciding what you're going to take seriously and what you're not. And just catch yourself taking things seriously that you were taught to take seriously, not that actually warrant it. So here's your reframe of the final shift, and that's the simulation signal. I'm the player. I'm not the pawn. I choose. So here are some of my final dragon thoughts of this episode, and I call this mastering the game. So picture a wise old dragon. I like to think I'm going to be 54 this month, by the way, folks. Picture a wise old dragon watching a knight panic through a dungeon. He's got weapons, skills, allies, and healing potions, but he keeps forgetting he's not powerless. He's just stuck in the stream. Okay, we're watching a game. He's just stuck within the screen. The dragon doesn't fight for him. He simply whispers. When you realize, my friend, that this is a game, you stop fearing death and start fearing regret. Stop fearing death and start fearing regret. There's a nice thing to do today. Stop fearing failure, overwhelm, or death, and start fearing regret of not trying. And if you gamify your life, that's a much easier decision. And when you master the rules, those are the rules I just shared, you start writing your own story and you start picking up the pen and writing it. So ask yourself, are you surviving or playing? If you're surviving, you can start playing today. Reaching or strategizing, are you confused by the code or becoming the coder? I love that too. Don't try to make sense of all of this stuff. Have fun. A great exercise for you today to shift in a big way is most people spend two-thirds of the time of their life talking and only one-third listening. Flip that. Become more open and curious and become a two-third of the time listener and only a one-third of the time talker. It'll change everything. So here's your next move. If life is a game, what level are you on right now? What quest are you finally ready to accept? Share your thoughts, and I'd love to know more about this from your perspective. So that's it for today. If you want to learn more about the work that I'm doing, we have this special community called the Make Sense Academy. It's kind of this area where I used to be a one-on-one coach, like a high ticket coach, and only certain people could afford that. So we've created a community at a very, very low cost where everybody gets access to my systems, my coaching, my mentorship, all of my coursework, my programs, and everything that people hear about, my communication technologies, my, help you sell and all of that fun stuff. But that's called the Make Sense Academy. Just reach out and just say, make sense, right? Maybe with a question mark. And I'll send you information risk free. Try that out. So, as I always say at the end of my shows, listen, if you learned something today, give it away. That's the only way it's going to stay. And by the way, have a nice day. Good to see you. We'll see you next time. Bye bye. Let's see if we know how to turn this off. All right. Bye bye now.